Hello and welcome to the April 26, 2023 Facility Implementation and Strategic Planning Committee. All members are present with the exception of Ray Bricalt, but we think he's going to be here. First item is approval of minutes from June 8, 2022. Sure, everybody remembers what we talked about at that meeting. Do I hear a motion or any questions or concerns?
Motion. So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve minutes. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna
Opposed?
abstain, I wasn't there.
And up one
You were
abstain.
there at that one.
Year? That was like a year ago.
You
Yeah.
were there.
It was there?
You abstained on the minutes at that meeting.
Yep, says right there, if you read the packet, it's
remember
right
it.
here.
Yeah, all the
Why was I there?
best
the way you gotta
best
read the
points in the
packet.
minutes were made by you.
Oh, well, then I 100% vote for it.
Okay. Okay, next item on the agenda is capital requests. So we have these sheets here. This is all building-related capital requests.
Excuse me, yes, Mr. Chairman, so, as part of our capital planning project, or process, all department heads with buildings submitted their capital requests for FY '24 through FY '28, and these are all of the ones that are building-related. Some of these have been fleshed out a little bit fuller, and those are the ones that are planned for funding at this town meeting for FY '24. But as you go through them, and we can talk about each one, as you go through them, you'll see that there's some pretty sizable requests, and that's namely a feasibility study for the DPW building and the fire department building, that would potentially result in either a new combination building or two new buildings. And so when FinCom was looking at all of these requests, they felt it was very important for, and I agree that FISP gets involved early on in this process to start talking about these major building projects. I don't know if you want me to just kind of go through them as they appear in the packet, or,
Is that what everybody wants to do, just go through them? That's fine.
okay. So the first one is the new steam boiler for the Major Edwards Elementary School. That is getting funded in the, this year's budget through the Capital Investment Fund. Then there are energy efficiency upgrades as a result of an energy audit at the schools. They're looking to do that in either FY '25 or '26. The estimated cost is $134,000. HVAC control systems, I think everybody here is well aware that there was a Colliers facilities assessment done at the school. And this is a result of that study, and this is a $1.9 million project for consideration in FY '27. Also, as a result of that Colliers study, Univent replacement FY '27 or '28 at $110,000.
These, if I can interrupt one second, these prices are today prices, not-
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So the
And actually,
1
maybe
So the
even.
1.9 will be,
2.4?
Maybe even 6-month-old prices, okay? Major Edwards facilities upgrades as recommended by the Colliers study. FY '25, they are hoping to start this at $5.235 million. Fire EMS,
excuse me once, so these estimated figures, this is from Collier?
I don't know how those, we'd have to ask the school how they came up with those figures, but this was what was submitted by the school department. I don't know how they arrived at the figures.
So is it possible that they are 25 and 27 numbers, estimated?
The-
Maybe they take today's numbers and go up 3% every year?
No, the when to do these projects was decided by the superintendent of how to plug these in. So that's the FY '25 is the superintendent saying we should start this in FY '25. I don't know where the numbers came from, but but they're not projected numbers. So that is it so far at the school. For the fire department, a replacement backup generator. The chief was looking for funds for that this year at $75,000. The finance committee had a pretty good dialogue about that. And then you will see the next item is a replacement of the fire station, which is a total cost between design, study, and construction, estimated in today's dollars to be $17.75 million. Same with a Public Works building, estimated to be $17.95 million.
Can I ask a question? Through the chair.
Yeah.
Are we building these buildings separate, or are we building a combined building?
So the thought process was that we do one feasibility study where we hire professionals to look at both buildings, the land where they currently sit, and the functions of the buildings, and make a determination of whether it makes sense and whether it can fit both on, together as a combination building on one footprint, or if there should be a separation between the two. My sense is that if we do these as a combined building, there might be some cost savings there. But it might yield that the professionals in this space say that's really not feasible at that location.
Okay.
So, I'm sure folks are gonna have a lot of questions. We do have a professional from the fire department here who can speak to, to some of the building needs, but, just going through more just the list, you have some photos in here, of the DPW building. There he is. The HVAC,
1 second.
If we haven't done any of the studies, where's the 17 million from? Is that just sort of the size of the building or something?
there have been a lot of recent, public safety buildings, fire, police, as well as DPW buildings that have been built, and so the department heads are looking at what the costs are.
And just basing it on comparable
Yep,
construction, okay.
yep. So after your designs
We can do
and
something.
engineering, you'd have much more clear, real numbers.
Okay.
Okay, so next is the library HVAC chiller. Estimated cost there is $70,000. And then there's a
Back
lot
to the,
of,
I'm sorry, back to the fire station, Bob. So this is, in 27, they want, so there's no way to renovate that building anymore to make it work right?
Obviously, I can't speak for the chief, but what I have heard is certainly there's been different conversations about the, as Jen had said, the feasibility of a combined building. There's also been talk about, once the design was there, to possibly utilize part of the fire station apparatus bay as a DPW garage type aspect and build upon that. So there's been a lot of conversation in regards to potential aspects as cost savings, but and again, not speaking for the chief or the DPW director, I think this is a worst-case scenario of take it all down and redo it, and I don't know if this even includes temporary housing and other aspects of the, obviously being out of business or being homeless in those particular cases and relocating, so, but again,
So these are very early numbers that probably aren't even close
Oh.
to being right.
absolutely. I think that is absolutely fair to say. And this is just kind of getting these two buildings on the radar for discussion so that when we are 5, 6 years out, we're not starting where we are today with all of these unknowns.
It's the only two buildings really left to be.
That's correct. The rebuilding the fan coil units at the library, a total of 90,000, and I'm gonna talk generally about library in a moment, about a couple of these together. Total is 90,750. An elevator for the library, 103,000. Rubber roof replacement for the library, 95,000. Electrification of the HVAC system, this is an older quote, but 789,000. So the library, I think folks are aware that there were some preliminary studies done talking about electrification system at the library. There's still studies that remain. You had a few different sources of grant funding to go that route. And right now, kind of the question is, do we continue down the road of $1 million potential project for electrification of the system, or do we do a conventional system? Now, there's some really funky things there with the library and the venting. But in my opinion, having a library director who has been educated in library science, is not the best person to be talking with these contractors, and I'd really like to see our facilities manager, once they get on board, really dive in and take the lead on this project so that Anna can do her job as library director. So that's gonna be a significant project, probably though, no matter which way we go. So,
And that goes for every building
absolutely.
owner. You shouldn't be talking to contractors about something that needs to be fixed in this building. That's not your, and that's, you know, across the board, that's important. I think.
Absolutely, but especially of a project of this magnitude with such a unique system that's at the library, really to have somebody there that can focus on that, I think is important. What you don't see, which is this next page, what you don't see on those capital requests are some of the findings from the ADA transition plan, which I actually want to talk perhaps offline with some of the FISC members about, so that we can fill out some timelines for this. But you have a wide variety of things that appear on this list that aren't appearing on the list provided by the department heads. So if you go through that, it's the town hall, one of our newer buildings, of course, exterior improvements, interior improvements, library site improvements, library main floor restroom, library modifications and barrier removal, municipal light plant. They're actually pretty well underway on this, accessibility improvements, DPW, feasibility review for parking or curbside improvements, fire department parking, lobby, restroom, entrance, fire department public areas, senior center main walkway improvements and access to Mixter Field, senior center rear walkway improvements, senior center interior modifications, police station sidewalk from the right-of-way, police station interior and exterior modifications, Major Edwards Nurses Station. Some of these are included, I believe, in the big $9 million for the schools, but basement ramp, feasibility study at Major Edwards, interior modifications at Major Edwards and exterior modifications at Major Edwards, middle high school exterior and interior auditorium, Pride Park Phase 1, which you're all well aware of, Pride Park Phase 2, Goodale Park, and the Town Common. So all of those items aren't appearing on what we have as tens of millions of dollars of requests, but they're gonna have to be worked in to that overall scheme, or we're just gonna decide, unless we have a debt exclusion, we're never gonna be able to do X, Y, Z.
Through the chair. Just specifically with the senior center or the police station, where they're relatively new buildings, is a lot of this stuff recent ADA code changes that have occurred, or
No.
is it issues that were deficient from the original design of those two, particularly those two facilities?
Correct.
Well,
And
for-
so,
You're in the town hall, right? So I'm
Well,
gonna say
the
town
town-
hall, senior center, all
so
of
the,
those.
a lot of the town hall is exterior access. Senior center is a lot of exterior access. Police station, a lot of exterior access. But then so coupled with this, there's a lot of small modifications that a facilities person can absolutely do in-house. So moving this coat hook down X amount of inches, putting on a grab bar. Small projects, like for this building, putting on an access panel. But then big projects for this building, renovating the walkway access and the ramps to get to that door. So there is a lot that FISP is gonna need to develop a plan for over the next course of years, and really, how do we start tackling some of these major projects? We don't have significant debt that's gonna be rolling off anytime soon. There's some minor debt rolling off, but not debt of significance, and how do we go about that?
Bob, you asked the question, for instance, sidewalk from right-of-way. I mean, when we built the building, you're saying the code said we needed a sidewalk, but no engineer that we hired ever told us that. Is there a sidewalk on that street, or we make a sidewalk from the right-of-way?
So, on the senior center,
No, on the police station,
on
for
the police
instance.
station,
Reference?
This number here? 85, 8.5.3, it says sidewalk from, I'm just using that as an
Yeah,
example.
so-
So I mean, is there a sidewalk outside of it? So we're just gonna make a sidewalk from the right-of-way, but there's no
So-
sidewalk in the right-of-way?
So in the ADA transition plan, there's some pretty specific findings, so let me go to that one. Would you, 8.5.3?
Yes.
I thought it was grading too. I thought something
It is
about the,
grading, so let me
the
see.
angle. No, I can't find it.
Police Department. Page 81.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I mean, so we need to look,
So, so where the sidewalk cuts into the driveway, no accessible route is provided from the sidewalk. There is not a consistent and apparent route within the driveway that has acceptable cross slopes. A walkway from the existing sidewalk should be constructed.
so we'll have to look at everything and see what's
And that's,
really required and what's,
so all of these things are findings, and in the ADA transition plan, they talk about when there are triggers for needing to do different things. And some of these, the trigger was that these buildings were constructed and they were already triggered. So those do need remediation. For example, in the police station itself, a soap dispenser not at the right height. That needs to be, like, some basic things, right? But then there are some more significant grading issues at the senior center with the walks at the senior center.
go ahead.
Just out of, you had said should, so just for clarity, are these recommendations or are these code infractions that could come back like the park or something
So
like
that is, it depends on each building and when it was constructed and what it is. Ultimately, so let me, here's a good example. So let's talk about the DPW building. One of the findings is that the public access to the DPW building is very difficult for somebody that's.
Impossible.
If you are not able-bodied, you cannot go to the second floor. So do you have to make that compliant? No, you don't. What you have to do is you have to provide equal access to our programs. So how could that be accomplished? There's two ways without doing any major construction project that could be accomplished. One is you move the public office hours or all of the office hours to another building, like this one. And so if the public wants to go to the DPW, they come here. The other is that you reconstruct, and that would have very minor costs, obviously. The other, which would have slightly higher costs, is that you create a designated accessible parking space that is well-signed, that states, if you need service, please call this number. And you also have a bell that's well-signed, so that if somebody cannot make it to the second floor, then it's incumbent upon staff to provide the same service that would be provided in the office down at the car. So it's program access that's important. Things like the bathroom at the fire department. There's a public bathroom at the fire department. Do you have to make that accessible? No. You can just say, the fire department does not offer public bathrooms to anybody.
So we have to look at that, okay. What else? So you're,
So
okay.
I mean, I think my recommendation is with the capital plan together with this document, and I do want to talk to some folks about, do folks think that some of these things might never happen, so I can finalize this document, or what's a realistic timeline for the ones that we can complete in a year, 2-year, 5-year, 10-year. And then I think that the next steps for FISP would be to probably have a meeting on the go. I'd love for folks to come in and look at the two buildings that are really driving a lot of this discussion, and not sit here and talk about them, but walk through them with the department heads and look at what the current status is. I think that would be helpful for folks. And then we can continue the conversation about how do we really develop a plan to peg these in.
I I have one question looking through some of these. There's a lot here. But some of them have like, this is not required but recommended. Will we have, I'm not asking you to put this together, but I'm thinking like a list of all these things, but we have like the first list, it's a recommendation, not a requirement. The second, bulk of work, a lot of these are like fixing a door, moving a sign. Our facilities person will start that as their task of things to do. And then the bigger things that are gonna eat through a little bit of money on our third little section is how I was breaking it up in my mind.
Yeah, so the Disability Commission is ultimately charged with the tracking of all these projects. So, but the prioritizing of all these projects is the piece that is the difference between this being draft
Yep.
and final. Once this is final, it's still a working document, but now we've identified, this is low-hanging fruit, this is moving. I can do it with a screwdriver.
We all say it's an easy task, but depending on where you're moving it, there might have to be repair to the wall that was there.
Sure.
So then when you try to match the
Well-
paint at that point, you have to paint the whole room because it looks awful. So these sound like
Put up
small
a
things,
sign.
But I'm talking about, when I say easy task,
not $19 million
you got
projects.
it.
No, the ones that it should be $50 and turns into a $500 one.
$500,000 task versus, the work that it will take to reconstruct the exterior of this building, sidewalk and parking lot. That's probably a $200,000 project when you're all in and you're looking at the drains and all of the slopes. So, that's not an easy task, moving the toilet paper a few inches.
Right. So, first of all, the capital, is it possible to have one spreadsheet with all of the capital?
So
Projects.
I have a spreadsheet of the requests that were submitted to me. I'm happy to share that.
Right, not like this, more like,
Yep.
this is what the total for
Yep,
2025 is.
I
This
have
is-
that.
Like
I
you guys
understand.
always bring us.
But the FinCom and Capital Investment Board has a separate document. Those two documents have not merged.
Okay.
So I have just what was submitted this last cycle, all in a spreadsheet, and you have what you've historically had. So I can share mine, and perhaps you can share yours, but Ray has asked me if I could compile that all at once, and I simply do not have capacity to do that at this time.
Well, no, we have these two boards, why would,
Well, you got something
yeah, I was
coming
gonna
up?
say, why
No,
wouldn't
nothing at all.
And I don't think, I don't think that this is not unusual just for our town.
Oh, absolutely
This
not.
is every town probably in Massachusetts.
Absolutely.
New old buildings
The Collins Center actually said, we're in decent shape.
compared to,
Yes.
They do a lot of these.
Right.
I mean, it's overwhelming,
to look
but
at, yeah.
not
That's what
only
I'm saying,
so,
I'm
not
telling
unusual,
residents that
we're-
this is
we're in
not-
good shape
yeah.
compared to some other.
And to kind of put a finer point on that, there are many communities that have not done an ADA self-assessment, never mind started to look at a transition plan. So the fact that we've identified these things and we are going to come up with a plan to tackle those that we can tackle, we are ahead of the game. But you're right, Massachusetts, we are founded in the 1600s. Some of these towns have extremely old buildings, and there are things like the historic nature of the building that you can request a variance. And some of the answers to this is going to be request a variance.
And so the town knows, this is a generational document.
Absolutely.
Like, people generations. This is not something that's gonna happen anytime soon.
and by the time we get close to the end,
We'll have
the
started.
laws will all change
Yep.
again.
You'll probably change it in
So-
6
And we're
months.
kind of lucky, I know there's some work that needs to be done in these buildings, but we're lucky we have 3 new buildings.
We do
If
have
we were
new
in
stock.
all- If we were in all old buildings, we would be worse, but what do you got? Ray, you gotta have something to say.
Well, obviously, I started off a little late, so
You didn't
sorry.
miss, yeah, you came in right when we started.
Have we priced the ADA compliance and along with the prioritization?
Have we priced all of the projects in the ADA transition plan? Absolutely not. How would we do that? We would never
That
know
was a weird
when that would
question.
happen.
Yeah,
How would we even accomplish that?
Well, there's got to be some rubric. by which to grade some of these things. I mean, there's an assessment of need, but it's also going to be compounded by the cost. So to just have a list of needs and not have the associated costs would make it a very hard parse to do.
So one of them
Could you
is. a
cap-
No,
parking
and no,
sign.
and that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I was gonna say because that would be right now.
That
We
would.
just went through this
so-
with all of our
So
assessments.
I would imagine, Ray, if a design and feasibility study for 2 buildings costs $200,000, if we would like to have an engineer come in, we can probably allocate $1 million for somebody to come up with that figure for us.
But then we couldn't start the work. I wouldn't.
So that's not a facilities manager, a town administrator, a FISP board come up with tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars and put a dollar amount on it. That is hire a firm to do that.
I guess the answer to your question was no.
That's what it sounded like.
Well, I mean, I always appreciate the gotcha moment, so.
As to the comment about the summary listing of capital projects by year and expense, it's something we've been talking about for about 5 years. Every year, every new department director wants to do things a different way. We've been trying to normalize that. It never rises to the point of getting done. So we're usually a year or two out as far as the currentness of the information on these spreadsheets, so we do our best, but until it's integrated into an actual town document, that's gonna be the way it is. So it's something we would very much like to change, but it also requires some systems adjustments so that the department managers are all using the same process for evaluating need and don't just restart from scratch every time we have a new department director, which
Well, I
is
think the biggest
always an issue.
one was the DPW. When we were doing the buildings, we asked the DPW director to come in, what about the building? The building's fine, it works fine. Then like 6 months later, we have a new building DPW director, and he was like, this building doesn't work for anything. The garages are too small, so.
It's endemic to the process. The new department directors have their own thoughts on how they would like to do things. They don't necessarily like how they've been done before. They do it their own way, and then we're left with, okay, how do you integrate that?
And I think the fire department had some of the same stuff. The last fire chief did a lot of work to get it where it is today.
Base, yeah.
Right.
But my point is not to point blame to anyone
No.
other than it's an unmet need that really could use some attention.
I think to Mr. Crowley's point earlier, that the department heads are not the people that should be doing analysis of their buildings. Sure, a department head can say, this is how much a flail mower costs. That's a product to go procure. This is how much a new XYZ costs. This is a vehicle, sure. But they cannot, without outside assistance, and I don't think frankly, a facilities part-time person is gonna be
Definitely not
able
gonna-
to
it's
do
definitely
that
not
either.
gonna do this, no.
So this is really, in a town like West Boylston, and to your earlier point, no dissimilar than any other small town, we're really kind of at the mercy of professionals that you need to bring in to give you those numbers. And we've seen time and again that we go out, in my head, I've done some analysis, Pride Park, I think it's gonna cost about this much. And then you get to the end and it's a much higher cost project. So not having that done externally can be a difficulty.
So I think at a start, why don't we, again, every town, that's why I'm gonna say.
Right.
Yeah.
Our rep and senator should try to get another one of these bond bills, which we have some luck, but not. And we try to put a project together to put on this bond bill that usually stay open for 3 or 4 years, and then we find out we get it or we don't get it, so.
And hoping, with bond bills, they're great if they release the bond, right?
Right. So that's, at least we can ask them to start fighting to get that done. In all cities and towns will get, because every city and town has the same issue.
So there are, just to remind folks, there are 2 legislative earmarks in this cycle that Rep. O'Day has put in for us. We'll see if they're included, but one was $125,000 for ADA upgrades to municipal buildings, open-ended. So if that prevails, we can start to pick off some things on this list, as well as $200,000 for Pride Park Phase 2.
Through the chair. So, on this, so the AD, I don't know who's on the ADA board or committee or whatever it is. They've already reviewed this. I think you're on it, aren't you? You're about to get mad.
No, I'm not.
Are they going to compile the initial, I do think like the listing out of these, like, you know, I'm looking at a few of them move signs where we can actually make some good assumptions who could do it, or is it put off? Maybe I'm laughing at all these slope ones because there's a ton of slopes. I'm like, well, we live in a town on a ledge, so we'll just blast it all and grade it away. But will that board put together something like that? I don't want to ask them, but I think it makes sense.
So the Disability Commission, the way that it's set up, is persons, there's some general community members, persons with disabilities, and then persons who have family members with disabilities. The way that I see them interacting best in this space is, as much as you have what we're talking about here tonight, some capital projects, which they really can't be in control of, right?
Yeah.
None of us in this room can be in control of that. That's subject to debt exclusions and borrowing and all the like. There is a whole section of this that talks about programmatic things, our website, the way we post things, trainings for staff. That's where I think making recommendations, holding those trainings for staff, coming up with lists of how to get a ADA interpreter, like a sign language interpreter, or training staff on TTY devices. That is really where I think the Disability Commission could really help achieve that more programmatic side of the mission.
The Disability Commission doesn't have the purse strings to do any of these things. So I think it's the wrong, not what Jen's saying, but we need to fix whatever.
I don't think I was clear on what I said. I'm thinking, see that blue paper?
Yeah.
Them putting this in that full spreadsheet of, by section 1, here's what we found that our school signs side, you know, we like that.
I believe that one of the members, the chair actually, has already started to create an access database.
Chair of what?
Disability Commission.
Okay.
Bob, did you have something?
Yeah, obviously not looking through the transition plan, was there anything that went to the point of how do the issues affect, you know, the higher priority or our greatest customer need type thing? As you said, the DPW was certainly an issue, but if it was the same situation was at Town Hall, that affects a lot more people. So was there any prioritization?
There
as
was
to
a survey
those
that
impacted?
was done to folks, and the survey yielded sidewalks was a high priority item to folks. Hold on, let me just, I believe recreational facilities was a high priority to folks. Let me just see. Public input survey, 33. All right. So, a wide variety of folks were surveyed. Not all disabilities were mobility related, of course, so, who's the chair?
Kim Hope.
So, one of those who reported an issue, common themes emerged regarding which facilities, programs, and services posed a barrier to accessibility. In the open-ended questions, the highest respondents' areas of concern were stated as need to, 1, improve accessibility of sidewalks, roads, and/or parking. 2, update parks, playgrounds, and recreation areas to be accessible. 3, improve access to town meetings, select boards, and other commission and committee meetings, both in person and virtually. And 4, improve accessibility of communication tools, including the website, printed materials, and mobility aids for the hearing and vision impaired.
Okay. So what does the board want our next steps to be? I know our strategic plan that Ray's been talking about for a long time, we still haven't really, this is part of it, but I think, is this all of it? Or is this?
I think from my perspective, we're talking about a fundamental restart. When we last met, we were struggling with, okay, what's the forward-going mission of the FISP? We kind of paused that and said, okay, let's take a survey of buildings. Well, since that point in time, the landscape has changed. I'm not quite sure how to interpret some of the bigger requests from the fire department and DPW, but I think we have to, the first step is how do we go about making a decision? How do we prioritize these things? And I don't know if we can, do you think we can say that we have a list of all of the projects that need to be attended to at this point?
No.
So,
No, I mean, things that you don't see on this, I'm just thinking of what I've heard, things that you don't see on this list, and maybe a little bit in the 88 plan, but Woodland Field. That's not necessarily a building, but it's another large project, right? So, there are things that,
But we need to have a list to prioritize.
right, so,
That might be something that, you know, if someone can't get in a building and go to a meeting, might be much more important than
Then a
having a
ten-
second field that we may not, need right away, So
Right.
that's gonna, prioritizing this stuff, because if you put a price tag on everything, we're up to probably $200 million, and we know
Yeah.
over the next 10 years, it's not gonna happen.
so on the total FY '24 to FY '28 capital requests that included things that were, you have just the ones here tonight that are building related, but on all of the submissions, it was over $50 million of requests.
Free cash.
Yeah, I would, can you imagine?
so if I may, as far as the Finance Committee and the Capital Investment Board are concerned, the priority issues are to at least have a plan for the DPW and the fire department, because those materially affect large capital requests in the next few years. So from vested self-interest from those two committees, those would be the ones we want to at least have a concept for how we're going to approach, if not a plan. We've got requests for fire engines, and which fire engine they choose might actually depend on what building it's going into. And you're talking, $500,000 to $1 million for an engine. So, we're pushing the can down the road right now. Same thing's true for the DPW building, and there, even a strategic plan for how the DPW would operate. The Finance Committee has been advocating for some kind of cleaning and maintenance station. So we're not replacing vehicles 3 to 5 years before they really should need to be replaced. It's not even on anybody's drawing board. So, where does that start? Does that start with the DPW, or does it start with the FISC committee? And, the schools have the Collier report, which is, whatever, 6 million in the short term and a fair bit more in the longer term. These are pretty big things that affect, certainly our decision processes on things to recommend in the relatively near term. So without a plan to kind of guide the decision process, it's a difficult situation.
Well, we've tried this, but I think we should still, for fire department, or any fire or DPW, look at a merger with another town. I mean, not just a shared service, I mean 100% merger. So we tried doing something like that with the fire department over the last couple of years, but we always talk about shared services, but it's hard to do. So, but I think the cost of just, why does every town need that $500,000 fire truck when we're 10 minutes from a fire, or from Sterling, for instance, or 15 minutes from Boylston? So, again, that's easier to say than do, because that's one of the hardest things over the years, is to try to really merge a service. The best we've ever done is some type of little sharing, but the towns have to look at that.
Well, I think.
Because we can't all survive over the next years with everybody having their own departments and buildings and trucks and staff.
Regionalization is definitely been a top priority at the state level for a lot of things. There's dollars there. When you get to certain departments, there's definitely a parochialism that is very prevalent. It might be fine in the abstract, but then who gets to have the chief specifically? Where if you look at the Worcester Health Alliance, nobody feels parochial about the Health Alliance. We have a great regionalization program. We get cost savings out of it. I was just at a meeting today with 2 other folks. So I think in those spaces, it becomes hard, and I know that there's been a lot of conversations. I've looked through files about regionalization of the fire department in particular, and from what I could see from those documents, it looks like, while West Boylston may be saying, we have an interest, that there's nobody saying, we also have an interest.
Right,
Right,
I
so-
agree. I mean, and I know we have some issues with dispatch, but overall, having a regional dispatch saves money, and you still hit 911 and someone answers. But whether you go to other parts of the country, there's not dispatches in every single town. There's 4 or 5 in the
Police
state.
forces.
There's 4 or 5 dispatches in the state, because this is, in this day and time, hitting 911 and with all the computers, but, so, so what's the next step of the FIS committee? What does the committee want the next steps to be?
So,
Go ahead.
Earlier you said it needs to live in a document so that making these priorities or making this list or even keeping a list is part of what you do, not just talking about it. Is that what is it, like the master plan? Is that what you, would that live someplace so that you could make it so that it's part of the plan is to keep track of things?
Capital plan.
Yeah,
Okay.
if I may, we're talking really about 2 different purposes here. The Capital Investment Board was largely created to govern purchases, let's say, in the $20,000 to $500,000 range. The scope of what we're talking about here, tens of millions, it's really beyond the scope of what our charter is. And really is why the FIS was created, is to take a look at the larger scale, more expensive projects. So the spreadsheet that we're talking about is just a list of equipment the DPW needs, fire engines, and et cetera, and those kinds of things. So it's in the context of making those decisions that we need guidance on what the overall plan is to make an appropriate recommendation on what we pursue and what we
And
don't
that
pursue
guidance
and what kind
doesn't
of
live in
timeline.
that document.
It's not designed for that.
And up till, Ray, you mention this all the time, this committee, the building committee, the FISC, whatever we renamed it to, we came together because we needed a town hall. We built a town hall. Then we said we needed a police station. We didn't have any plan, we just kept jumping to those 3 things, then the senior center. But now, for the future, we need a plan of what's gonna be next and what's gonna be after that, so.
So you asked what's next. I mean, my thoughts would be, we tasked the town administrator to accumulate a list of all of the larger asks, and that the priority for our next meeting is to do an initial assessment and try to come up with what's the process going to look like to decide what's next.
You've already got a tool, I haven't
Yeah.
looked at it, but we have 20 pages from, granted, it's not a facilities person, it's the building people, each chief, the library director, filling this out. We have some tool to start that process already.
yeah, we started that in our last meeting because though we would love to, Ray, assign it to other people to do, it's actually the job of this board to kind of put those together. Because that, or we could all just be on a board and assign everything to the town administrator to do, which doesn't make a lot of sense for us to be on a board. So we had put this together with a list and had reviewed it with all of you folks to make sure it was right to send out to get the need, to get it back, to collect those. And then also, we have what was done at the school to put that forward, and now we have what's part of the ADA, but it's, unless we would like to hire a secretary to put all that together, we can't assign that to other things. And I always hear that in boards by people that are like, oh, assign it to this person. Then why Why are we all sitting here? When I go home and I have to do something, I do it. I don't assign it to someone else in the next neighbor's house. But at least it gives us a chance to see what's out there and come up with a plan. That, or I would just say, hey, town administrator, do all the work, decide what you want to do and let us know, and then put it out there, right?
I don't think
That's
that's,
really-
I don't personally think that's what he's asking for, to tell. I think, I disagree. I think the staff, there's hired staff in this board, and there's volunteer staff. If there's things that the secretary can put a list together on a spreadsheet by taking all this information and putting it on a spreadsheet, I don't think we're asking him to do the work. I don't think we're only asking them to put a sheet
So
together.
I have already put together, as I said,
There
an
you go.
Excel spreadsheet for FY '24 to FY '28 requests. That's comprehensive, it's not building-related only. However, I don't think that me transmitting that to this board for your next meeting, and the only difference between tonight and the next meeting is you now have an Excel spreadsheet, moves this any further. I think that it really makes sense, like I said initially, that the next meeting is on the go. We either do DPW and fire together, or just one or the other, and you walk with that department head through their building.
So, but with that said, though, then we're making the priority, the committee's agreeing that the priority, next priority is looking at those two buildings.
No, those two buildings are going to take 7 to 10 years before they're done.
Okay, so whatever they, whatever.
If we're talking facilities, so I think the ADA plan probably shouldn't have been presented at this meeting.
It was really just to say that this isn't incorporated in these capital requests.
Yeah, but I mean, if we narrow this back down to, you know, because the ADA plan is more of a select board needs to digest that plan. We narrow that down to what are the buildings we have, what are the priorities? Clearly, it's gonna be the DPW and the fire department because everybody else has 3 new buildings, plus the library is in decent shape. Those other 2 buildings, not so much. So, I mean, clearly that's gonna be the focus of facilities in this town. What else would it be? Unless we're gonna build another building for some other purpose, which,
What about the schools?
but the schools are the schools, that's not under the purview of the FISP. That's the school, the elected school committee has to tell us what they
Their
wanna
priorities
do.
are. Yep,
So,
but we still need a way, a mechanic, like we've, even in the last meeting, we keep having these meetings, but there's no, how do you wanna prioritize, how do you wanna look? This was something that everyone said they wanted, we put it together, did it, had it voted on, and now it's, are we gonna use that information?
I think we all need to digest this and look at these, and frankly, I'm not fully prepared for this meeting, because it was tax season and I was away, it's not an excuse, it just is what it is. But we should all digest what these department heads have told us, and I think I would be shocked if we don't say DPW and fire are the 2 biggest priorities, and then work towards those 2 buildings.
So, yeah, you're right. If it's buildings, that's what's
I
left.
mean, that's what we are. We're,
That's what
That's
we
what's
are.
left. Right, but that's, first sentence, the mission of the committee shall be to establish a strategic plan for municipal buildings of West Boylston. So,
That's-
if the way we've been doing it is, we haven't had a plan, we've just said, that's not a plan by saying the DPW and the,
well, the plan so far has been,
We
what
need to-
building do we need? Let's do it
that's
next.
what I mean. So we should change the mission of this committee and say that,
I mean, that's,
because if a strategic plan, that's,
so we need to, I think, we need to figure out between the police and fire department, police.
DPW and.
DPW and fire department, those are the only 2 major building things that are left. I mean, yes, there's some library work that needs to be done. The other 3 buildings are essentially new. So-
taking out the handicap accessibility issues. You're talking just buildings.
Right, I mean, for us to,
Oh, well, on that point. On that point, I think that, like, I don't think it was not the right thing to do to bring up the ADA requirements, because I think we do have to prioritize some of those. Like if there's something like the DPW where we're denying services, we have to
do,
address
but-
that.
But
And that may be cheap, you
that's,
just
but
remove.
that's, I
not
think,
called
in
a
my
hearing.
mind, that's a select board function, not a FISP function.
Oh, but
Okay.
we go back to the DPW director or the director of that department. If it's a matter of putting a sign out with a phone number, I don't think any of us should be involved.
And that has, nothing to do with the select board or the
It
FISP.
should be the town administrator together with the directors of
We
those
need
departments,
we
those
need
little
$1
things.
million worth of outside work, then the FISP would be involved in that. But I think as the FISP, we should focus on what are we gonna do with the police and DPW buildings? Doesn't mean we can't
Fire
also.
and DPW, why you need a
I
police?
keep saying
station?
police, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Bob, what do you got?
But with that said, beyond,
Fire and-
It's
beyond
because of
funding the
this.
feasibility study, and I know we don't fund it, I don't see that there's really anything further for us to do until there's a feasibility study to actually look at something. So it's almost like we need to get that $150,000 and then have presentations to say, you can do 2 buildings, you can do this, you can do that, and move the pieces together. But
we
knowing that it's clearly identifiable that the DPW and the fire department have the greatest building needs, there's no expertise and no reason to have expertise here to go any further except for funding an expert to identify what,
And
how
for
it
us
can
to
be
walk
done.
around the building, we still need what Bob just asked for. We can all walk, I've walked that building many times, both of them. If we're just looking at quick fixes, that we can walk around the building. But to look at what it really needs, a feasibility study, that's,
When I say that, I've heard a lot of comments, and this is why I say to walk it. I hear a lot of comments, not from any person in particular. They're fine. It's fine down there. It's been fine for this many decades. And I think that's important for the stakeholders to go, and perhaps you have walked all of the buildings, and I'm sure you have, but I think that there's other people who haven't. And I think it's important for the stakeholders, before you just say, it's fine, to go walk those buildings.
yeah, I don't, okay, yeah, I don't know who's saying it's fine, but that's, go ahead.
So just for clarity, in what I was suggesting, I didn't mean to imply we don't do a walkthrough. CIB does that for anything that's being asked of us. We actually look at it so that we have a first-hand take on really where's it at. So I was just assuming this is in addition to a walkthrough, and whomever might be available for that, if we can work out the logistics.
Go ahead, Raj.
But-
Do you have something? No? Oh, go ahead.
I also didn't want to pass over the comment about starting with a feasibility study. Not to be discordant, but I think we have to have a concept approach on, was it DPW, schools, or fire department, as far as what we prioritize next, or if we choose to prioritize more than one thing. I think, Pat, you may have said, we're setting the schools aside. Well, I don't think we should do that, because we're talking about a strategic plan to fund a resource of the town. And that includes debt exclusions and prioritization of a very large chunk of money. I don't think it's in our best interest or the town's best interest to say, well, that's their problem, let them deal with it. I think that has to be integrated into our planning, as it's a burden on the aggregate resources of the town.
Yeah, but we can't prioritize that. The school committee needs to come, which we've done in the past, invited them to our meeting, and they prioritize what needs to be done, because we can't prioritize what needs to be done at the school.
But again, it's what's,
I don't think Pat's saying, don't worry about it, it's not an
control.
issue.
Well, no, but I think also, they have prioritized, they've sent everybody the findings in the report, and they've put through the request for millions. What in addition do you need them to provide to you to make it a priority? Because we went through this all the time. We go back and forth a bunch of times about this.
What's that top priority right now, the school? Do we have a list of what that top priority is?
They have it, we did it in the last meeting, I think.
What's
Put
their
it
top
through. It's
priority?
like,
It's
One-
those items
Yeah.
that are in here in the FY '24 to '28 capital
Okay,
request.
so they gave us prioritize,
Yep.
so if we put a strategic plan together, we can put that into the plan.
But that's the physical construction. How do you fund it? There still
Well,
needs to
that's,
be a
of course, we
plan.
need the plan, and then we gotta fund it. That's part of the plan, I would think.
But my point is, you know.
There's only one way we're funding this. There's only one way we're funding it, is with debt exclusions.
How much,
Well,
when?
I know that. That's why we need to have a strategic plan. We can't just,
But excuse me, so, let's say that the school department needed $5 million, the fire department and the DPW. Correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't really matter what the school's, any particular department's priority is, it's the town who says 1, 2, and 3, it'll go in this order, so wait in line, and once we get through these other two, no?
I don't think so.
Yes, but, so, if it was petitioned, by folks on the school, then the town would be not at the table in deciding what to go forward with at a certain time, if it was petitioned. So,
Like a town meeting petition to.
Correct.
Okay.
correct. So there are professional resources in this area to help with capital planning and strategic planning for municipalities. I have no idea what the costs are. I could give a guess tonight, but it would be really uneducated. If folks think that you want some outside guidance, I'm happy to look at what that might cost, and, you know, we can consider funding that maybe at the fall town meeting. If that's an avenue that folks want to pursue.
Does anybody have any comments
I
on
do.
that?
Should we reevaluate this part-time facilities guy? Maybe we don't, maybe we need to do more with we could keep a full-time facilities guy busy doing all this kind of stuff.
It's not a facility, I don't
Not
think
a
it's a
facilities-
facility guy.
it's a
We need
capital-
engineering,
it's
we
a-
need,
So capital planning, it's how to even pull from the department heads what their needs are. The whole capital planning process, sometimes it's done, I think sometimes it's done at this time of the year, sometimes it's done at that time of the year, to really solidify a good process, a good document that becomes a living document that has the data and resources available to both the citizens and the decision makers on various boards to help guide that process. It's not gonna be, that planning assistance is not an engineer that's gonna say it's going to cost XYZ dollars. It's for assistance with the process and helping to prioritize between things, knowing you have debt falling off at this year, this is where we're gonna plug in. Okay, let's plan to plug this in the future.
well, why don't we get the list of debt and where it stands from the
Sure.
treasurer collector?
Yep.
So, can I?
Yeah.
Is that CMRPC can help any of those things? Do they have any?
CMRPC doesn't really work in that space, but there are others, like UMass Boston Collins Center, but there's also many others that work in that space for capital planning.
Okay, what else? If,
The one key thing is, the money.
it's always the key thing.
A strategic
talk
financial
millions,
plan to go along with
When
it,
you,
Yeah,
just
when
to
you
it's
talk
all-
about millions,
It's always the money. I mean,
Hundreds of.
hundreds of millions, school, fire, and the police,
If we had hundreds of millions, I don't think any of us would be sitting in here, would just be hiring and putting out to bid and off to the races, right? That's of course the problem.
Okay, any other comments on this, or?
Well, I know the last time we met as a committee, there was some commentary, just talking about the cumulative building fatigue of the town, that we put through 3 projects in reasonably rapid succession, and wanted to give the town a kind of a break. But I really think we need to get back to it, particularly, and I think Jennifer's right as far as timeline. It's not gonna happen anytime soon, and I think a lot of the debt that we have right now will roll off in that kind of timeline. I think we had $100K coming off this year.
And 500 next year, and then it was the proximity of those, the big one, there's 3, boom, 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 right in a row, so, there might be some overlap, but then it would be with the timeline, there might be like a year or 2 of overlap where you have the double impact, but then they eventually fall off.
So,
But I'll share the roll-off spreadsheet with folks.
But we could take a look at, just arbitrarily putting in, a couple of $15 million projects. How could we index those? How could the debt support capacity take that? But it probably won't resolve the issue of the schools, which we probably do need to have a strategic discussion about a debt exclusion to get there.
I think too, the other thing is that we should be mindful of what the market's doing. So this plan to have a little bit of flexibility in it, like 2 years ago, to go out on a debt exclusion was very beneficial, as opposed to right now, it's less favorable. So to have that flexibility that if maybe it's a year or two earlier, but it's gonna be ultimately a cost savings for the interest rates to go out, or maybe it's a year or two later because the interest rates are not favorable.
But you're looking at the future for possibly an override, not a debt exclusion.
So capital, debt exclusion.
I know,
Operating,
but you're
override.
looking at next year. we could
Possibly.
Possibly be in.
That's correct.
Right.
I still think some of the information here is probably would be better for your boards, because at least it gives you a timeline on things, like you can quickly see the roof was installed here in 2004 with a life expectancy of 20 to, 25 years, which means it's gonna need to be replaced within this period of time. So it still gives you, because that's the stuff that's probably going to come to your board or to that board for funding. And there's a lot of, it seems like a little bit, I'm looking through the list and I'm like, oh, 50, 100,000, and I'm like, $400,000 all coming up in, 2030 or something, in 6 years from now, you're gonna be $300,000 in just one building of just natural upgrades that needs to happen.
To the buildings that are not on the list of potential replacements, sure.
Yeah.
This is the town hall, by the way. So I'm looking at the town hall. Okay. So we're not replacing this in the next 10 years, but
No, but there are, if,
It's-
some things for capital investment board, there are failed seals on a lot of the windows. At some point, there might be a window replacement project that's lower in scale, but do it before it becomes a major
or
problem.
just know it's coming.
Right.
We normally
Right.
let it sit and don't do it till someone complains or it falls out. That's, I'm gonna say that exaggerating, but, I look at the library, everyone says great shape, but a majority of those windows are way over its life expectancy, would need to be replaced. That's not gonna cost you 50,000 or 100,000. But
Yeah.
it depends on how you wanna look at the different boards and how you wanna manage them. We could just continue ignoring all of that and just wait till they put a paper in, though. It's easier that way.
Okay. If there's nothing else to discuss today, then entertain a motion to adjourn, I guess, unless.
Can we at least list a target action or two for the next meeting?
Okay. Go
Maybe a
ahead.
date for the next meeting.
Let's
And a date,
target
yeah.
action. What do you got?
Well, and I guess, Jennifer, if we're in agreement to at least schedule the walkthroughs, and we'll see what there is to look at. I think the kind of general list of projects that are not included here, and the Woodfield, the park replacement things that may not be here, at least we can have that perspective. Unfortunately, I think Pat's right, that we've got two or three projects that really need to be focused on, but we should be informed as far as making that decision. I think the main topic of the next meeting is how to prioritize what's coming.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
If, could you say, as a way to think about this whole thing, is the funding really gonna be sort of one of the driving forces in how we figure this out?
Yes.
So why don't we make this spreadsheet without really, we'll just use the 17 million for one, 16 million for the other, and put in estimates for other things, and then we can sort of look at how we could even conceivably do this in a time frame. I mean, if these things aren't gonna hit for a few years, that doesn't mean Woodland can wait 15 years because it's after, a debt exclusion for, a fire department. I mean, you're gonna have to do all this sort of where it'll fit. And is there a way we could do this without actually having to do terribly accurate assessments of value or construction costs or something like that? We'll just say, like, whatever, this building is this old and it probably will be in the range of this much to address windows and this and this and this and this, and just see how this even looks. Is this, or give up on some things. I mean, just so that we can make sort of sensible decisions, sort of in a, what's the last couple? In a strategic planning idea, I mean, we have to have sort of some
But
ability of a
we
roadmap.
can't sit here and say, well, we think the windows in 10 years will cost.
No, but if we say we're gonna have this much money available, hopefully for something, no, we won't, okay, then the windows can't be a problem, or whatever it is, I don't know what it is. I mean, just so that we can have sort of a way to think about this that isn't hoping, praying,
Well, for the large projects, it's not coming from, it is coming from an exclusion. So that is a planned process that you are planning to go out. The smaller projects are very much at the whim of what our free cash numbers look like.
No,
Would
our
you say that's
capital,
fair?
free cash and capital, our capital
Well,
money. We
the-
have $1 million something in capital.
But in the long term, it's the same thing.
Right.
And right now, we've swept free cash into the capital investment fund, and it's built up a little bit, but we can easily expend that
But
next
you-
year.
you know, you
So it's
also-
a question of just the ongoing free cash that'll
You want to
survive.
leave in my opinion, you want to leave a good amount in the capital investment fund, let it grow, so that if you have something that's unexpected that's $1 million, you have a place to turn. And also for planned down payments or the bigger projects. But the projects that are a $50,000 project, that's not a stabilization fund.
I think right now this committee is looking at the trees and not the forest. We've got 2 or 3. We have 2 or 3 things that are our next priority. I'm saying we have no control over the schools, so we should, yes, we have to coordinate with the schools. We need to look at when is there gonna be money available for, and the stomach to spend it by the town to replace the fire department, replace the DPW, and build new schools. When the windows get recalled, that's not this committee. That's not what we should never be talking about any type of, this building's gonna need a new roof, the library's gonna need a new window. That's not what we're here for. We've got 3, I mean, it's not that difficult. And Mark has a good idea with, hey, let's plug in the 17,000. We're gonna look at that. We look at the DPW, we look at the fire department, we talk to the 2, we make a decision. How do we wanna move forward? I mean, that's it. This strategic plan does not have to have all these ADA improvements, does not, we need to be looking at the high level building new buildings. We're not looking at, if the sidewalks, for example, we put millions of dollars worth of sidewalks in the past 5 years, that never came to the fist. Neither is the sidewalk, the $200,000 sidewalk that's gonna have to happen here. That's not, we're building buildings committee is what we should be looking
So,
at.
right, that's, when we were called the
Change
building
the
committee.
charter. So change the charter.
Well,
Change
that's,
the
I know,
charter
because
and the
when we were
things
the
that-
building committee, that's what we were, but when we changed it, when Leon changed it to the
I mean,
strategic planning and,
strategic implementation, but that doesn't mean when we put a new roof on a building, at least in my mind it
What is
doesn't.
it, just building new buildings?
Yeah.
Then you have no, so what I'm saying though, think about that. You own a house. You plan, if this house, we're gonna let this one just go to and then I'm gonna build a new one. What are you doing?
The $20,000 to $500,000
Hold on.
projects.
They're talking, I don't wanna.
we
be
have to beep
interrupted.
that because you just
we have
swore
to
on TV. So I don't know how we're gonna cut that out.
Oh, go ahead.
You did. No,
No, she did it.
the $20,000 to $500,000 items fall under the CIB. The building a new building falls, or a major renovation of a new building falls under us. So
Okay.
there's gonna be no major renovations in any of the buildings that we have a control over besides DPW and fire.
I go back to change the charter to be a building, you're a building committee for new, make sure it's very clear, not upgrades, not maintenance, not strategic planning for upgrades. It is solely to build new buildings. I'm just, I don't wanna argue with you,
No,
I'm literally saying, you look at what we're supposed to do, that no one does, by the way, in town. No one does, that's why this is where we're at. We would just say, we build new buildings, this board builds new buildings, that is super easy. It really is, let's do that, I like that charter better, and then leave the other parts out.
Well, if you read the mission, it does say buildings and other structures, so it does say buildings. It doesn't, you're right, it doesn't come down to the details of windows and roofs. Our mission
think-
does say that.
I have a different interpretation of what our charter is.
A mission.
Well, I'm good with that. I'm good
Okay,
with
so
that
we're all
interpretation.
set with the mission, so what do we want to?
Can I say only
Go ahead.
one thing?
Yeah.
Only one thing. So, we do need DPW, we do need
Well,
the
that's two.
fire. Need DPW, we do need the fire station. So we have to build both of those along with the schools. But schools, there are so many other steps has to be taken. So think of if we have to build both. The one thing is, do I build one by one, or do we build both together? So which is cost effective? So, but if we build it together, when do we build? This is the way we have to go. So either we like it or not, we have to build it. At when? That's it. That's what I'm,
We'll pick a date, we'll just do that date.
You gotta remember our first,
so are you going to fund it?
And we'll just ask the town, there's a process for new buildings, this is not brain
So that's-
surgery, said it 3 times, let's do that. Pick a building.
we gotta remember when the building committee started, we had a multi-use building. What was it, $20 million? That was the
Would've been
first
nice.
one.
One that.
It was 20 million back when we
Yeah.
started looking at it, so, and then we broke off, so we can't make that decision, we need to have engineers and somebody tell
Again,
us,
you know, we did-
is it better to build these buildings together or build them separately, they're on the same lot? All questions that we can't answer as this committee.
So do we prioritize that spend to have someone come in and tell us this? You're laughing, because this is going full circle, and we're
Well,
just gonna
so
redo
I
it.
think as I was just pulling up the entire mission and reading it kind of in its totality, I think that based on what I'm hearing tonight, I think that it does make sense for the select board is the board that established FISP. I think it does make sense for the select board to consider kind of refining the mission statement and either make it that it is for the so the general statement is that it's the strategic plan for municipal buildings. Now, if it's the strategic plan for municipal buildings, we are talking windows and doors and sidewalks. But then as you go on and you dial down into where it's talking about working with general supervision over the design and construction overall public buildings, that now sounds more like we're really just talking about construction projects. So to clarify what the select board really envisions FISP to be, and then kind of move, which is it? Is it strategic plan for municipal buildings or strategic plan for major renovations?
Well,
Or
building new buildings.
major renovations or constructing new buildings, and then go from there.
I have a question then. Like, the spreadsheet or whatever we have, that's got 17 million here, 16 million here, maybe some for school. Then, as far as a strategic part, you could decide that when you're gonna time these things so that when some old debt falls off, you don't immediately build a project, you let that budget money go into the CIB.
You
No,
can't,
there's no budget
you can't.
money.
No, it's not.
Taxes go down.
Once it comes off, it
Oh,
comes
taxes,
off.
it doesn't stay as a.
No,
So
and
once
you
when we built these, we made sure that kind of the day it was going off was the day the new project started, so
Correct.
the residents didn't see any
Change.
that taxes didn't go down. The change could have been, we did nothing and the taxes went down, but we kept it level and we built these other buildings. That's how we played it. But we can't say, let's keep that money
was
coming
just-
out of your check and putting it in capital.
For
We actually
capital investments
accelerated
boards,
payments for several years, so it wouldn't do this.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
went like this.
I'm looking for a way that he can get money into the capital investment board
Not that.
fund,
Not
so that he can do his own projects without coming to us.
not with debt exclusions coming off.
I was like that, he's not doing these.
Not with debt exclusions coming off. That once they
No,
come
the
off,
smaller
they come
projects,
off.
the project you were saying you're responsible, $50,000 a year, a truck.
Well, they have a
or
million
something.
something in that department.
Yeah, but it's gonna go away. I mean, you
We add
gotta,
to it every year.
we have to keep adding to it.
No, that's really kind of a town administrator, select board, finance committee discussion on how to fund things.
Okay, so you mentioned one thing that you want on the future, next agenda, that we have that, right?
A list of other projects that might not be on the radar, schedule walkthroughs, get the spreadsheet for the 24 to 28 requests, and get the debt analysis.
Yeah, and so the next, we usually have these meetings on the last Wednesday, so it would be the 24th of May, if that's when you want to have the next meeting. Do we want to have it at 6 and do the walkthrough? Do you want it, is the priority of this to have
I feel
the
like
next
there's
meeting?
something already on there.
I'm not available, but
Yeah, I was gonna say, is
You don't
there
need me.
a,
I can
That's
just
when we,
send it
that's
out.
when we used to have these, the fourth Wednesday of the month.
I'm sorry, I have select board visiting hours here, that's already
So
been
we can have it on
publicized.
that night.
So you guys do
You're
it and
you're in
tell
visiting
me.
hours right now.
Yeah, so he's having them right now. So the 24th will be the next meeting. Do we want to do a 6 o'clock and do that walkthrough at that time, or do it on?
So I am out of state on the 24th.
Okay, so
But
when's
they-
it best
But
for
you could do
the,
it without me.
when's it best for the department head, though? Does he want us to have it earlier? Does he want us to do something, have a meeting on a Saturday? You know, all these,
How about I check with the department heads about when it would be convenient to do walkthroughs and circle back about whether they would like it in the evening or on a Saturday.
or earlier in
Chris,
the day?
do we also want to add a refinement of what the charter says for
Well,
this
that would be the Board of Selectmen.
Well,
That
yeah,
would
but
come
we
on
would
the
have to
Board of
request it,
Selectmen. Yeah.
right?
So that would come on to the Board of Selectmen.
Do you want to
Yeah.
make a recommendation?
Yeah, I would like to make a recommendation.
I mean, again, we can all read that and we can all interpret it differently.
I
Right, which is,
Yeah.
just,
It does
yeah,
say
just
buildings,
clear
it
it up.
does say buildings, but, okay, if there's nothing else,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?